Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to go into our first match. It is going to be Bozzzton versus BoarControl to kick this week off. And just one final reminder, it's one of the few weeks we have left. So now, although of course every match wins, they're going to become progressively more important, or at least deciding as a factor as to see who gets in those relegation spots or not. Bozzzton here having his Priest banned away, Sol, and the Warrior banned away from BoarControl. So what do you make of this pretty interesting ban, considering both players have similar-ish lineups? At least in terms of class.
I actually spoke to BoarControl about this earlier, and he was talking to me about the difference between Risky Skipper Warrior and the more control-based list, if you want to look at it like that, with extra removal spells and Evil Quartermaster and so on. And you see here in Bozzzton's Bomb Warrior, he has the Risky Skipper package in there. And Boar specifically said to me that he will leave up Skipper Warrior, but he would ban the other variation with his lineup because he thinks that's how the matchup spread affects things, which potentially get into a little bit more detail on later on if we get into any of those relevant matchups. But I do think it's something that does need addressing because there's still almost a 50-50 split, it feels like, on Skipper versus no Skipper in Bomb Warrior. And we kind of saw that it seemed like a lot of the top 8 and top 16 had Skippers in the Masters Tour, but overall the Skipper package had a lower win rate, so you can kind of draw mixed conclusions from that as well. So It really does feel like one of the unsolved dilemmas right now, so it'd be interesting to see how it develops.
Yeah, and something that's I've been looking at least over the past day or so is just still the approaches to Druid are just still varied. Whether it's Malygos, whether it's Mount Sellers, whether it's just going for those, for example, the King Feoris style, which is a little bit of a newer one that really popped up, I would say, over Masters Tour. And one thing to me that I don't think we have it in Europe unless I'm blind and missed it on the deck list, but there's even the new Malygos with no blooms as well that we've seen people starting to pick up that little bit more to test out. So there's still some options going on there for the Druid, and we see Bozzzton does have Malygos Druid, whereas BoarControl is on that survival of the fittest Mount Cell list.
Yeah, you say people plural picking up that list. I'm not sure if that's quite accurate. I don't know if it's quite propagated beyond that one person just yet, but we shall see. It's an interesting development to keep an eye on nonetheless, but we are going to get into it. Go ahead.
I played it, so...
Could anyone count less than you, Raven, honestly?
Great way to start the day, as always. Just how I like to start the first match. Bozzzton is on the top on that Druid, and it is a Malygos one going up against BoarControl's 2-off Priest. It is including the Galakron in there. But this matchup, to me, Sol, does seem a little bit tough for BoarControl, especially because Bozzzton is running that Geppetto.
Indeed, Geppetto has come back in with a vengeance. We did see a lot of people running what I'll refer to as the orange list, which is a little bit more anti-aggro focused for quite some time, where Geppetto was one of the cuts. But looking through the list for this week, it does seem like Geppetto is coming back full force this time around.
And I think that's key, though, right? Because when we originally saw Malygos Druid, it cut crystal powers, which is madness to me. But here the cuts appear to be on the animals, right? For that guardian animals, there's 2 Twilight Runners, 1 Teacher's Pet, 1 Lake Thresher in this list. So that does make a little bit of room, or at least even one of those cuts will make room for that Geppetto. So I think I actually like it overall, because a lot of the time if you get 1 guardian animals off, that's normally enough in this Malygos list.
Time waits for no one.
Here though, Bozzzton does have his overgrowth in his hands, so he is ready to start ramping away. Whereas BoarControl still not getting off to a bad start himself, having the early minions to play just to pile on a little bit of minion pressure. It's about the best that Priest can do, right, in this matchup, at least in the early game.
Yeah, it's generally what it comes down to, particularly against Mali Druid. They kind of have this inevitable conclusion against you, often through burst damage and through board a lot of the time. So honestly, one of your best bets in the matchup as Priest is just to try and get down as much early damage as you can, stick Apotheosis, put pressure on the opponent, try and force Moonfires, swipes, whatever it is out of your opponent's hand. At that point, you can check 1 win condition off their list, which is like the full 30 burst combo over most scenarios, and then at least try and continue to pressure. But even if you don't, at least then you can sort of sit back and try and just remove all of their Sarah portals, whatever it is, and you don't have to necessarily worry so much about getting burst over the top.
I do wonder now with these choices of the studies, I wonder if Evasive Worm, although may not be the best sort of isolated minion, is just a good response to an expected Guardian Animals next turn, right?
Yeah, it certainly looks that way.
I think Big Ol' Whelp was just good there. Card draw, priest, dragon, ticks all the boxes. But I do think the worm is just the respect to the Guardian Animals on curve, isn't it?
Right. As is this 3/7 and the positioning here. Big minion in the middle. Although Bozzzton... Actually, Bozzzton is running one Lake Thresher in his
One
deck,
Lake
so, yeah,
Thresher,
that does make
yes,
sense.
yeah.
In the hand currently, though, but Boar, of course, does not know that. So having a 7 health minion that requires 2 attacks and putting it in the middle here does create maximum potential disruption for the Guardian Animals turn.
And I will say, you know, me and Pocket Train, pretty knowledgeable about this archetype of a Mali Druid. One thing I missed when I was testing the list, and I think I would miss it on any Malygos build, it's brooms. I think brooms are just so good. Obviously, one will be great now for Bozzzton, but the more different versions I play of Druid, whenever I play a list that doesn't include broom, I wish I played it. There are so many instances where it'd be very powerful, whether it's with the Ysera dragons, whether it's with, you know, the Guardian Animals beasts without the Guardian Animals. I don't know. It feels like such a good card, but in Mali, I don't even think there's the space for it.
No.
One of those 32 card decks you want, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean 36 card deck maybe, right? Because there's a lot of like there's a lot of good Hearthstone cards that don't get in Mali Druid. It's kind of crazy when you have to fit in all the extra combo pieces and swipe and whatever else. But actually, as Boar makes an enormous tempo play here with the Wave of Apathy on curve, but I actually think it's one of the most compelling reasons why Lake Thresher quite often isn't played in Mali Druid. Because obviously people will look at these lists that quite often double Teacher's Pet, double Twilight Runner as the beasts for Mali. And they're like, well, you know, Lake Thresher's insane when it comes off Guardian Animals. Like, why wouldn't you want to run it? Well, without a broom, you'd much rather have Teacher's Pet drawn than a Lake Thresher, right? Because at least a Taunt minion impacts the board immediately. It has Taunt. Just a Lake Thresher as a 4/6 when you have to play it without a broom is so incredibly slow that I think it's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of Mali Druid lists choose not to include it.
Yeah, and we see a bit of a double whiff there from the Geppetto for Bozzzton. He could have hit, even though he has Mali and Ysera in hand, he could have hit the Alexstrasza or the Omu as still decent payoffs. But instead got the 2 Twilight Runners. They were the, I think with Gidra, they were like the 3 bad ones, right? Left in the whole list right now.
Yeah, he has had his odds cut down a little bit already, obviously having the Ysera and the Mali already currently in hand. But he has also now entirely busted his Guardian Animals on top of everything else as well. One Lake Thresher played, 1 Teacher's Pet in hand, and now the double Twilight Runner pulled off. That's his entire beast package at this point.
Yep. And yeah, I like the Soul Mirror choice there from BoarControl. Just getting that in hand ready to go, I think is just super important. It's the one card that if everything just suddenly goes terribly, and that was, say, the Malygos to clear the board, it's the one card that might keep him in the game a little bit longer as well. So, you know, what we can see, of course, that the double Twilight Runner is not going to bust the game open here for Bozzzton, and honestly, I'm not even sure what you can really expect to do right now.
Yeah, I can tell you it's not currently in this hand, though, so I certainly think it starts with the Breath of Dreams.
If only he had a broom, so could help.
He could rush these 1/1s and something.
Draw better cards!
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Here, though, this just, although Bozzzton had access to his ramp, BoarControl had the tempo, and that one Acolyte turn, I think, has just paid off in spades, right? The Acolyte on-curve steal of that just solo-played Thresher has just never let Bozzzton actually kill any of these early-game minions.
Yeah, that's the payoff, right? This is kind of regarded as a pretty bad matchup by most people, as Bozzzton seems currently slightly upset with the situation. Because generally, you'll see that kind of tempo play early on from the Priest. Most people will go for that in the matchup. But then it stops, and it generally stops around the point where, you know, Boar had the sickest tempo play of the game so far, which was the Cabal Acolyte Wave of Apathy on curve. If you can back up an early push with that insane tempo play, that's when you're in business in the Priest matchup. So, you know, Boar's had a very, very nice curve to support the way he's played, but he's played it out perfectly so far.
Coin Tyrant doesn't really get him anywhere, I don't think. I think, if anything, he has to consider trading first and maybe using the Tyrant as the way to kill off the minion if it's some kind of realistic threat.
I mean, he has 1 million damage on board, and that's a taunt minion in the way.
That is true. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, actually, yeah, it can all just go face, right? Yeah, maybe that's just good. It's just so annoying with it being 1 damage off, right? It's just like, he still has to trade an additional minion in.
Right. Or considering various outs from Cleric of Scales and Renew, but I think this is his best odds in the position. Even if another taunt minion does come out here and he doesn't end up having lethal, he played a 4/10 this turn on top of everything else, right? So, like, it just seems fine.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's one of those weird moments where Boar had the option, of course, going for lethal is great, but had the option of, because he was winning so much, he could have taken it slower, which sounds really weird, but he had the power to do so. But you are completely right there with the choices there. Just going through the options that would have either silenced or cleared off, you've just got to say, if it's not a big awkward taunt, it's just the game, and Boar takes that. So a pretty crazy game, actually, and Boar's going to be feeling fantastic about that game 1, just getting a win with Priest versus Druid.
Yeah, certainly in the position that he queues into there, gets the arguably bad matchup straight off the bat, but picks up the win in the unfavorable, which can be a very, very big deal in Conquest. And it looked incredibly straightforward. And I think Mali Druid does have that possibility, especially when you start putting some of the greed back in with Geppetto and so on, to just have these very dead hands that don't really get the job done if you draw all of the expensive stuff. You know, we even saw Bozzdton had the Overgrowth that game, which normally Overgrowth fixes everything in most matchups. It doesn't matter how greedy your hand is at that point if you found the Overgrowth. But you saw Bozzdton's hand was just tipped too far against him there, where he just wasn't able to get the value out of all the expensive 9 and 8 drops that he picked up in the early game.
Yeah, really good start there for BoarControl, taking game number 1, but it's not over yet. We're going to go to a quick break while we sort out our game number 2. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. We are back with Bozzzton versus BoarControl. BoarControl taking out game number 1 there, Priest versus Druid. We've got game number 2 coming up very, very shortly. And I do believe, Sottle, it is going to be the mage from BoarControl going up against Bozzzton's warrior. And this is what we talked about earlier, right? Like, BoarControl has chosen to leave Bozzzton's warrior up when it is generally, outside of this very certain lineup builds, generally Bomb Warrior has been the ban across the board. And do you think it's actually going to pay off for him? I know you were speaking to BoarControl, but do you think it's actually valid and it's going to pay off in this series?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk from Boar's POV here as to what his thinking was with the ban, because he was calling out that he felt the differences in the matchups were that Skipper is the worst against Priest. That's the worst matchup for Skipper, the Skipper build of Bomb Warrior, but also that it's worse than the other build versus Mage, Druid, and Warrior. And, well, take a look at his lineup. He has Druid, Priest, Mage, and Warrior. So he clearly feels like, for him, the Skipper Warrior is not a ban. He says the matchups where the Skipper Warrior excels is against the straight-up burn-focused deck, right? Like Face Hunter, Weapon Rogue, Stealth Rogue, Demon Hunter. Those are the ones where the Skipper build really comes into its own. But it's interesting to me, this is the one where, you know, I would potentially be a little bit surprised to hearing his take on it. I would totally agree with everything he said up until exactly this point in this matchup, because I've always felt that Risky Skipper is a very useful card in this matchup, just to be able to very cleanly deal with a lot of the early game board situations with lab partners, sorcerer's apprentices, mana cyclones, solarians, all of those kind of 2 to 3 health minions that appear in the early game. So you don't really have to be, you know, throwing shield slams or anything into them. But I guess, you know, Sword and Board serves that purpose a lot in the other build as well. So maybe that just serves as an adequate replacement. But very, very interested now, based on that information, to see if Boar can now back that up with a win.
Yeah, it's always cool to see matches played out when one player specifically has a very, maybe not very different ideas about it, but different enough for it to be a bit of a surprise, at least to me. And we'll see how it pays off there. Pretty solid opening. Primordial Studies, Cram Session there, and that Mana Giant already in hand. BoarControl, I could see, or I have seen games like this get a little bit locked up with, you know, maybe a very underwhelming Cyclone if you can get hold of some spells, or the Mana Giant stays in the hand a little bit too long. But the Astromancer Solarian has helped out quite a lot here.
Bozzzton with a quick shake of the head here, already not happy with the situation I was in. He's in, I'm sorry. I can understand his feelings coming from the last game, where he did certainly have a pretty unfortunate game of Mali Druid, and now a very, very smooth curve is appearing on the other side in the Tempo Mage matchup.
See, now, BoarControl, I think, would have loved a lab partner. Is this worth a coin, Sol, just to get that Cram Session in now?
100%, yeah. Coin to draw 3. Beautiful.
That's it, right? I think there's always just something, at least in my brain, that tells me you've just used coin and not played Mana Cyclone. What's wrong with you? You wasted a spell. But the draw 3 is just so powerful here. And going into these turns now, it is getting more and more likely that these minions can be cleared up by the warrior.
Yeah. Think about it this way, Raven. Boar doesn't have a Sorcerer's Apprentice in his hand right now. So if he coins, draws 3 cards, and one of them is Sorcerer's Apprentice, he could then have 7 or 8 coins in his hand quite easily with that Sorcerer's Apprentice.
It's a reasonable way to think about it. Good job. I will think about it like that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm here to educate as well as entertain. Yeah.
I think BoarControl would have loved one of the 1-cost spells that did a little bit more than this. Mirror Image isn't bad, but I think, you know, you look at Magic Trick, Ray of Frost, just multi-spells, basically, to help get this Mana Giant down.
Dude, just an Arcane Missiles on this board stage.
Sure,
just rip it.
Yeah.
1 mana Mind Blast.
Yeah, going into turn 5 isn't normally where you want Mirror Image, is it?
Alright. It's a semi-useful card in the matchup. But normally when your start has been a little bit slower than this, it's one of the pitfalls of Tempo Mage, and it's one of the reasons why some people don't like it and feel like they have a lack of agency, is that sometimes your game plan plays out in a certain way, and then you need your randomly generated cards to support that after the fact. It's sometimes a little bit harder to do it the other way around, where you like randomly generate some stuff and then figure out a game plan with them. Because obviously Boar's already being very, very aggressive here. So he wants the cards that he generates to support that aggressive game plan.
Right.
But Mirror Image is kind of a go-long card against Bomb Warrior. It can help you survive Wrench Caliber swings and tank a few bombs and actually, generate some value in the late game. But that, you can see, like, just tempo Raz, right? That's just not where Boar's head is at right now. He is just trying to push damage as aggressively as possible.
And also of note as well, Mirror Image definitely worse versus the Risky Skipper build, in my opinion. I think it's a lot better versus the other build of Warrior, which is funny enough would have been banned. So kind of a weird one. Definitely more something you see on ladder, and it is just the 1/1 that survives. I think Boar would have wanted almost any other minion apart from that exact one to live, but you don't always get what you want, Tom.
You try sometimes. You might find. Get what you need.
Does BoarControl just need a mana giant down this turn? Seems, even though it is 6 mana, which sounds like 1,000,000 for those mage players who think like, oh, mana giant, it's not 0 mana, I'm not playing it. But this looks like a good follow-up.
It's certainly appealing. Opponent at 17, couple of arcane missiles worth of damage banked up. Potential for Evocation to find burn. Potential for Arcane Breath to find burn if he can pick up a Spellkin here as well.
No pre-built armor either.
Right, which makes the Shield Slam removal a little bit more difficult. And even, from 0 armor, your 8/8, this is kind of a classic Warrior dynamic, is that an 8/8 is very hard to kill from a standing start because Shield Block, Armor, Shield Slam is kind of the go-to combo a lot of the time. So liking this from Boar. He does extend a little bit more into the second brawl here, potentially, by playing the mirror images, but I think having the added layer of protection does make some sense here, and of course the mirror image functionally free in this scenario since it does discount.
Yep, and if you are adding Risky Skipper to the things that mirror image is weaker to, well, the giant isn't really weak to a Risky Skipper turn this turn, right? So even if those minions are cleaned up by anything but Brawl, it means that the giant almost certainly lives, if not certainly. So yeah, I don't mind the mirror image there.
Yeah,
it's pretty solid.
So not only does it just naturally protect from melee damage going to the giant, which isn't the biggest deal, also with just a solitary 1/1 on the board, there's still Blade Storm outs for the opponent in some scenarios to be able to clear out the 8/8 giant. So I think Boar has decided here, probably quite rightly, that the mirror image plays around more things than it plays into with just the second copy of Brawl.
Here comes the Skipper and the Armorsmiths, though. That's definitely a slight issue to help out with some armor gain, at least with these shield slams. Is it going to have to be 2, though? It is, right? Oh, no,
just the 1. Just one. He gets exactly 8. Yep.
Yeah, I cannot add up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 2 from the first, 6 from the second. 3 minions, 2 Armorsmiths.
Yeah, the second Armorsmith really being clutch there for Bozzzton, and pretty much what he had to do to actually survive in this game.
Right. Finally now, though, Boar has some minions to throw some of these spells at, which honestly might have been another motivation behind the play on the previous turn, right? Is to try and encourage Skipper as much as possible so he can actually throw a bunch of these spells at a few minions, clear them up, end the turn with Cyclone.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Like, look at this. If it was the other way round, it's just worse, right? If you did some kind of empty half Cyclone turn with no minions on your opponent's side, just doesn't really work. So the way in which BoarControl did this now opened up some hand space if he needed to play the Evocation, but also just made sense. And now Bozzzton back to the drawing board. But is this ever just a good time to land this Galakron down? Relatively weak board pressure from BoarControl here. BoarControl here.
Relatively weak BoarControl from BoarControl here.
I like it, honestly. This is with the Galakrons in general, unless you have a very specific job for them, which the Warrior one especially doesn't normally have.
Yeah,
I do like the get it down when you take the least damage that turn, and then it's done.
Ooh.
Oh, Risky Skipper's never gonna die.
Big Skipper. Yikes. Discovers and Generations not being particularly kind to BoarControl right now. I was kind of talking about this earlier, right? Like, he really wanted more spells to support this by being aggressive here, and he just didn't get any of them. No damage, no Board Generation, no Deep Freeze, no Power of Creation. Discovers again here and kind of gets more of the same. Netherwind Portal is about the most aggressive thing that he's actually managed to generate in this position.
Yeah, and you even see, like, the desperation, I would say, from BoarControl there, because he picked a Netherwind portal when he already had one in hand, and he could have played 2 secrets that turn. So he even just respects the fact that, literally nothing else is better. I'm just going to Netherwind portal into Netherwind portal the turn after, probably, just to get some value, because the choices were that bad.
Finally! Oh!
Look at his face. Oh my. I was like,
that's so
pretty good minion. Pretty good minion.
If Bozzzton now wants to shield slam this or remove it in any other way, that means he doesn't get to commit to the Wrench Caliber this turn.
Does he need to commit to the Wrench Caliber this turn? I don't think so.
There's a lot of swings in his hand to get through.
What if?
Maybe what if he just plays it with the plan to actually kill it with Krastinov next turn? How do you like that?
So play the wrench swing or play the wrench no swing?
Yeah, play the wrench swing, and then or at least maybe not even use Krastinov to kill it, but have Krastinov to play to clean up the rest of the board at worst next turn. Because with Risky Skipper Krastinov, he could clean it up if it wasn't healed or transformed in some way.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. Possible.
And then at least he starts swinging.
I think you can flip the argument on its head, though, and say, like, because Bozzzton has all of these charges to get through, he basically drew every weapon synergy card in his deck, but no weapon up until this point. They're just playing max removal that turn, gives him the most time now to get through all of these weapon charges, right? And just have bombs explode in Boar's face from this point.
I'm going to say it's all because it looks pretty good to me. Is this a potion turn?
I'm looking at it.
Gets to play Cyclone as well, potentially.
That's the kicker, right? I'm just frantically trying to work out hand space here, because obviously he has to clear space for the minions to begin with, and then he needs to actually have space for the spells from the Cyclone at the end of the turn. So maybe you just do half of that, and then you play a Cyclone without the Apprentice next turn instead. Obviously, it's going to be worse than what you could potentially do this turn, but I just don't think you have the hand space this turn to actually make it effective.
Yeah, you just give yourself another Cyclone turn, right? He still has an Apprentice in hand because he bounces that as well. I think this was actually really good. This gives Ball the most options the turn after.
Yeah, I like it too. Still has a fully twin spell Ray of Frost on the left-hand side, so he should be able to get plenty of Cyclone value still off the second Apprentice. He's going to get an Arcane Missiles here a lot of the time. Makes sense to me.
Even with Icicle drawing a card, right? That's still more value. That might open up some options going forward. Krastinov gonna come down first.
Yeah, sequencing. Minion comes down first. He's checking out secrets and whatever else. Obviously, Krastinov can be played first as long as it doesn't attack first. He's gonna, having checked Mirror Entity, then checks Counterspell. It's bad news that it is Counterspell.
And yeah, I was going to say, I like this going face. Yeah, just let's start ending the game. I think should be the plan here for Bozzzton.
Completely agree. Hello?
Okay. Is this just go again? I don't use all in because that suggests that BoarControl just throws everything on board and hopes. Well, that's kind of true, but the Mana Cyclone will then refill his hand pretty much. So
exactly, yeah.
By all in, I mean, is this just BoarControl's pop-off turn to the max now?
Certainly looks that way. Violet Spellwind gets to go face here because Boar doesn't currently have enough targets for all of the spells he wants to spend here.
He could... Yeah, he could end up Ray of Frost in his own Spellwing, right? That's
right.
Let's use Icicle first, which makes sense. Draw a bomb. It's actually not that bad, looking at it. We can see, of course, Boom is in hand for Bozzzton. Oh, jeez.
It's just too much! It's simply too much, Raven. Ray of Frost the 1-1. Boar needs some time here. He's going to have a lot of castable spells still this turn, potentially. Yep, still decisions to be made, and they need to be made quickly. Still decisions to be made. Second Cyclone's going to overdraw. Still decisions to be made. On a power left uncast at the end of that turn as well. Disaster ending for Boar. It was an incredibly complex turn. It branched and rebranched at like 4 different points during that turn, but obviously you can see that is by no means optimal towards the end, and Boar shaking his head quite rightly. So he knows. We don't need to tell him. He knows.
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, everything looked fine. I liked the Conjurer's Calling pickup choice from him. For me, my only real question would be, did that final Cyclone need to be played that turn? I don't know the answer to that question. It's just my only point where I was like, oh, that looked weird.
I mean, I think it's fine to play it there, right? It just Board didn't have enough time. So, like, you can modify that question as, like, should he have just realized he was roping and held the Cyclone?
Well, yeah, I guess that's my point. Yeah, that's
but
my
I think
point.
playing that turn optimally with the way it panned out probably does involve playing the second Cyclone, because he still has so much unspent mana. 2 mana remaining with 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices on the board. Like, you know how much stuff you can still do with 2 mana when you have 2 Apprentices in play?
Do you know how many cards you can fit into this turn? Just a little bit of a small Dr. Boom, and again, that's kind of why I was mentioning why BoarControl drawing that bomb off the top last turn wasn't so bad, mainly just because we could see the Dr. Boom.
So Board does have to play some kind of clearing turn here, it looks like. He doesn't really have the freezes to rely on. So Rolling Fireball will get the job done here, along with Minion and a source of 1 damage. Is there a better way to go about it that gains more tempo this turn, though? We could know if we'd have already played this Tome of Intellect and Font of Power at this point. That might give us useful information.
I wonder if he's ever considering, like, double Rolling Fireball or Rolling Fireball with a Polymorph first. You know, I think that's why he's waiting, because I think he might potentially want 9 mana this turn.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why he's holding off.
I was saying he could have cast those 2 cards at the end of last turn and already had them cashed out.
I thought you meant like, oh, they cost 1, they generate some.
No.
Post-Polymorph world, this is a scary minion for BoarControl to see as Bozzzton. Would take control of this game.
Yeah, I wonder a little bit about the Rolling Fireball usage there to protect... the Polymorph usage to protect a 2-1 when Rolling Fireball kind of did the job on its own. Because there are still a couple of big threats that do need dealing with, but this is pretty much the only one, I guess. Spellkin now, but the Arcane Breaths are long gone.
I mean, this is where Mirror Image can get the work done, right? But the problem is, it's not only the Mirror Image for BoarControl to survive, is how is he going to deal 19 this game? He's not really that close to the end of his deck, so it's not like he can rely on drawing a Prime anytime soon. And that's pretty much it. I guess he's got what? He's got Mana Giant number 2 plus Conjurers. He's got Mana Giant in the deck somewhere, the second one.
Yeah.
Again, that's it. It's just not in hand, so it doesn't matter. Should he have like missiles first to see if you can then like roll in Fireball Mirror Image to kill off the Deathwing? Devolving ain't gonna... Well, okay. It's probably not gonna cut it. I'm not gonna say never.
Yeah, Mirror Image has to be played. So, like, the Rolling Fireball line to clear through whatever other methods, you know, with Arcane Missiles and Ping and whatever else, and then end with Mirror Image. Like, it's fine. It's certainly a play to keep you alive that turn, but, like, does it win the game? Because I think you have to rewind to what you said just before that, right? Is like, you still have to end the game yourself and actually deal this 18 damage. So you need to get some minions in play somehow. So I kind of like where Boar's head was at, where he went digging for better solutions from a few of his random generations before he committed to the Mirror Image.
Oh my. Well, that's just going to be game number 2. Yeah, one thing I was surprised at, though, I didn't know if BoarControl was potentially in such a desperate spot that he had to survive that turn and draw exactly, you know, Prime or, you know, or that level of response versus just playing a Cobalt. But Bozzzton does fight back, gets the win there with the Warrior. And, you know, we talked a lot about the Warrior being left up. It has got its win now. I don't think, or I guess it is important to point out that BoarControl's strategy wasn't to just dumpster on Warrior with his lineup. I don't think it's not like a hard target. It's just an interesting point of why he chose to leave it up. But it's going to get a win, which means Bozzzton is on his way to actually taking this series as he's now evened up versus BoarControl. But definitely a tricky game there, honestly, from both players.
It was, and it was a pretty slow start from Bozzzton as well when he drew so much weapon synergy without the weapon. But he did just have those couple of key removals at the right time when he needed them. And the Brawl, obviously, then worst outcome for Boar in that position, where it was the Spellwing surviving, and then the really clutch removal on the Mana Giant the turn after, which I did like the play from Boar just to try and press the issue with the 8/8 on the following turn, even though it cost way more than you usually want to pay for it in that deck. And it did need a pretty big committal from Bozzzton to be able to clear it, which is, again, I think is something Boar might have had in mind as well, to get some minions into play to then activate his Mana Cyclone for the following turn. But from there, like, Boar was kind of just playing Mana Cyclone every turn for the rest of the game, it seemed like, and partly through some of the spells he got generated, and partly through him running out of time and making a bit of a mess over one of those turns in particular. Just wasn't there in the end.
It was not. And as I said, this is all even now. And it looks like Bozzzton now is going to be the one playing the mage, whereas BoarControl has swapped over to his druid. And we've seen Bozzdon's Malygos druid so far in this series, but BoarControl is playing the exotic Mount Seller with survival of the fittest in his list with the animated broomstick. So I think this matchup is, I think, at least sort of a pretty tough one for the mage, especially because the broomsticks have just added that extra bit of security in that even if you don't get exact guardian animals, there are still options to be able to clean up these mage boards.
It's true. I do think brooms have helped the matchup. I think brooms have helped a lot of matchups, to be perfectly honest.
Brooms just sick, isn't it? Let's be honest.
But the mage certainly still has game here. They still have those kind of early game draws where you get a spell damage minion curve, you play the cram session, that gives you resources, you curve out through your mid game, and by the time Druid has already tried to stabilize with their Mount Seller or Guardian Animals or whatever else, so you've got them down to like 10 or 12, and you can really try and press the issue and end the game. And then there's the late game way you can win, which is just a board swing with Solarium Prime. Like, quite often Solarium Prime can just fix any board state and resolve it into a position where Druid just don't really play cards in their deck to deal with it, right? Like, if Solarium Prime just clears your board and casts Power of Creation, how does Druid come back from that? The one and only answer, really, is Broom, and something spectacular to come alongside it.
And this turn I really want to ask you about, because it's one I find myself in a lot, is you have Bog Beam on 3 mana. There's no ramp to play, so you're not skipping ramp to Bog Beam a minion.
Yeah.
But that minion's only a wand maker. I find it very tough to turn down an on-curve, just go away kind of play for a minion. So I think I probably Bog Beam a minion like this too often. But do you like the way BoarControl's done this with the hero power set up over 2 turns?
I do, because of his hand specifically. He doesn't have a turn 4 right now, right? Like, I think a lot of the time you would Bog Beam this 2/2 if you had Overgrowth in your hand, potentially, right?
Okay.
Well, Bog Beam might be a bit of a different argument, because obviously if you have Overgrowth in your hand, that Bog Beam's going to be free very soon. So maybe that's not the best explanation, but because Boar has nothing to do next turn anyway, he feels like, well, I can hero power it this turn. There's a good chance I can then commit to hero powering it next turn as well. There are draws that can change that. Overgrowth on the top, of course. Lightning Bloom would be something to think about if he draws that as well in this situation, but I think he feels relatively comfortable just stretching out his resources a bit more and just holding on to these tools for his Mount Sellers, because that's the other part of the context of his hand, right? Is he has 2 Mount Sellers to try and get value out of right now. Not just 1, 2 entire exotic Mount Sellers.
Look at that. The nature studies into Bloom can help him get there as well, or just help him have more options in the exotic Mount Seller turn. The lack of ramp is going to hurt him a little bit. He just tanked 4 damage from 1/1 maker. There's already 3 power on board here for Bozzzton, and the damage is just going to keep rolling. And this is one of the, I guess, I'll say one of the drawbacks of, again, not this situation, but in general, of if you choose to tank the damage, that is like 4 extra damage you have taken this game at this point.
It's
We're
fair.
going to see if the hold is going to pay off for him in the near future. Though it's looking a bit dire right now.
That's a lot of mana available, though. So you can get exotic Mount Seller +3, but that's only really a Bog Beam right now, because Bog Beam will go back to full cost as soon as he ramps.
I was even looking at the potential of like Ysera and Ironbark, but that's not enough because the Ironbark becomes too expensive. So yeah, it's kind of rough. now choice between Ironbark and Bog Beam, and the problem is the Bog Beam might not kill one of the big guys, depends on which we won't kill one of them if he aims at the wrong one. And there's not an, I wouldn't say there's a complete obvious choice, and it could go very wrong if he messes this up.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a scary moment, honestly.
I think we saw one of the potential best pieces of Jandis mechanics. Okay, so we saw Surrender get paid off, but actually, like, genuinely objective, good understanding of mechanics in this situation. It was a good read, it was a good position, everything about it. This is one of the first times that I've seen in GM where someone just got mind gamed. Like, just unlucky.
I love it so much. I love it so much.
Bozzzton living rent-free in BoarControl's head right now.
And also, just look at this board state. It cannot be emphasized enough what a huge difference that has made. Like, 4 whole extra damage when BoarControl is massively overloaded next turn.
Yeah.
And he's only on 23. Insane.
The 4-1 just trades with the Mancer. The ultimate revenge.
I'm very interested here to see how Bozzzton chooses to go for this. He's pushed a lot of damage, and he has I'll say a free turn next turn because BoarControl only has access to 2 mana, and he just saw him use the blooms. Even an Innovate was used, so he's got to expect he has 2 turns to set up here. Do you like the "I'm going to remove your board" plan, or would you have thought there was potential options with Evocation Hand to be a little bit more aggressive?
Yeah, I was potentially looking at being slightly more aggressive than this. There are points to Bozzzton's plan here, right? Like, for example, that 5-4 wasn't a 5-4 anymore, and everyone knew that, right? So Bozzzton was able to get maximum value out of it on his terms by trading it into a 4-4, when in reality it was a 5-1, right? Because it was the confirmed illusion at that point. But you have to ask the question of what's more value for that 5-1? Is it trading into a 4-4, or is it dealing 5 to Boar's 18 health total in this position? And
still needing to be traded into.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It still exists. Like, the minion doesn't just die, right? It still needs that 1 damage.
But the problem is, like, Bozzzton was also looking to piece together a clear with Arcane Missiles that turn, because it's possible that you could, like, isolate, say, the 4-4 Death Rattle on the board afterwards and just leave it there, and then go face with your, quote, 5-1, right? And then, as you were saying, Boar still has to respect it and trade back into it. But because there was an Arcane Missiles clear involved with what Bozzzton was doing, I guess he felt like he had to pick apart the bigger minions so the smaller ones could get cleared, but I'm not sure. I think there was a window to be a bit more aggressive there from Bozzzton's position.
Yeah, I will say, with Bozzzton's, again, I'll call it the free turn, it didn't look like it actually managed to achieve too much.
No.
He has an ice barrier up and a pretty poor board, honestly. I do think for this to pay off, really, this evocation has to be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
BoarControl looks like he's in pain over this thought here, but I would have imagined that having this Ironbark for Mount Cell next turn looks like it could be way more important.
Well, I think he's stressing over his unknown knowledge of the secret, right? Because he doesn't know what the situation is going into the following turn.
Sure.
Because it looks great, but if it's Spellbender, then potentially you get yourself into some trouble, right?
That is true. I really like the Azure Explorer pickup here from Bozzzton. Onyx Mage Scribe, I'll try and say words properly, is, I guess, just the most value. Not playable this turn, though.
No. You do also have Evocation in your hand, right? Like, how much do you need additional value outside of that?
I was literally about to ask, does 2 extra spells outweigh an Evocation, right? Like, are you going to play those both in the same turn, probably?
I like this. Curve out, push what damage you can this turn, which ends up being very little because of the world's greatest Silverback Patriarch. Let's get to rip missiles for 6 here, though. There we go. Lab Partner does get to preserve that 1 health. But now, yeah, it looks like the curve could potentially just be drop a 7/7 here, if free to do so from Bozzzton, and then fish for lethal with Evocation the turn afterwards, which I like. Yeah, all sorts of things I think could have gone wrong from Boar's perspective on this turn with the Mount Cellar and the Ironbark. He gets the knowledge that none of them did, though.
One thing went a little bit wrong. It's a
Sure.
pretty rubbish beast, but it's
That's
a minor
fair.
thing. Things could have been a lot worse, but things could have been also a lot better.
Yeah. No mirror entity, no spellbender, no counterspell. You have to call that a win from Boar's side, I think.
What to do?
Yeah, he knew the mirror, that right? He knew it wasn't entity.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, honestly, not the easiest turn for Bozzdton here. That's 6-11. That is just a lot of health to get through. And does he really want to just play a 7-7 and pass this turn?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
like
think
this. I like this line. Plus
Yeah, me
3
too, me
spell
too.
damage, ton of spells to be able to chew through this. Rolling Fireball,
roll-
he's hit the potion again. He's also hit Polymorph, though.
Time runs out on me.
2 Primordial Studies on top of that as well.
Wow. Yeah, even just polymorph trade seems really good here.
Studies, Poly. Yeah. Seems good.
It's weird though, isn't it? Because although this is obviously good, he got a polymorph, this is great. He does need to just have that final push over the line and like Flame Strike, Evasive Draconid. Like none of those are actually like ways to end game. But looking at this now with no rush available for BoarControl, he didn't get all of the broom. This means it's going to be limited.
Everything's so shiny, Raven. Look at this team.
My dream is your nightmare.
BoarControl's just going to have to hope.
Yep.
There's what, 7?
7
7
showing,
damage,
8 with the ping.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh well. Help.
This is the most lethal arcane missiles I've ever seen in my life, Raven.
Especially with Cobalt Geomancer in hand as well.
Yeah, Cobalt, come on down. Welcome to the team. Get in here,
Yeah.
buddy.
Join the Sparkle Boys,
Yeah.
What to
The
do?
new
What
band.
to do?
in Hearthstone.
Sounds like Twilight fanfiction to me.
Yeah. Imagine if that's what it was called. It's not called Twilight. It's called Sparkle Boys. Do you think it would have been as popular?
A simple step.
I have no concept of why it was popular in the first place, Raven, so I can't answer that question.
Well, those don't look like lethal to me. I suppose. I do wonder, does the mirror image protect his board enough to just go face anyway?
I mean, there's no way we're killing this 412, right? Like, Bozzdton has paid incredible attention to the board state here, but yeah, I mean, it's an enormous
I was
amount of
more
spell
meaning-
damage, but...
Yeah, I was more meaning it's just using the double images make you like hyper safe as opposed to one. But yeah,
I see.
It's fine regardless. Yeah. Welp.
I concede.
Not like it cuts it to me, Sol, and neither does it to BoarControl. Bozzdton now striding forward in this series, 2-1, taking the win on that mage, and BoarControl. It was a tough game to manage there, and Bozzdton made that tough for BoarControl, but just nothing quite added together, right? Like, couldn't quite get the good Mount Seller. He had to go very heavy a little bit too early with those blooms, which then just like neutered the following turn just a little bit. It was a rough game for BoarControl, but honestly, Bozzdton was putting him in that position. So I think a really good execution there from Bozzdton. I was worried for a second for him there that was that turn where he had the free turn a little bit too slow and not aggressive enough, but he made it work.
It wasn't just that turn either, though. Like, he full traded down for like 2 turns after that as well, when he had the opportunity to be pushing face. But I guess that's just what he thought was going on. Like, he had board, he was sticking board, he wasn't really worried about losing board. So if he just kept control of the situation from board side, you know, he was going to be in control, because even not the turn we really talked about, like after that, when he polymorphed the Mount Seller, he full traded into both the 1/1s after that as well, instead of pushing damage to face, which kind of surprised me in that spot as well. But hard to argue with results, I guess. And he's able to get over the line, or really not finding the answers he needed. Didn't find that overgrowth in the early game. Pretty underwhelming Mount Seller turns in the end, considering how much they ended up overloading him. And now here we are with Bozzdton's failed druid from the first game now having another shot at clutching out the series for him.
Yep, it's going to be the Malygos Druid for Bozzdton, and just a quick check. I do believe Boar is going to be queuing his Druid once again. So Mount Seller versus Malygos. And I will say, I do think there was a nod from Bozzdton of saying, well, what cards can he be sitting on for so long? If he has the survival of the fittest, what if I just have the board clear? There's just nothing they can do about it without a broom, which again wouldn't really work on an empty board anyway. So I do kind of like it to a certain extent, but would the game have just been over by then? I don't know. It's tough.
That's the thing, though, right? Is that Boar didn't ramp that game, and he was overloaded for a lot of it. So actually, the survival of the fittest was a dead card for most of the game because it was uncastable. There were several turns where Bozzdton was trading very aggressively, where
I guess
that wasn't even really a threat.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
With both blooms gone. Yeah, you're right. We are going to show you BoarControl's hand in a minute, don't you worry. But Bozzdton, at least to begin with, looks like it's just an overgrowth keep to me, Sottle. Or do you like are you a lightning bloom keep, at least with that hand, with your Sarah, Twilight Runner, and overgrowth?
See, now you're asking the real big, hard-hitting questions. We'll make you a reputable journalist yet, Raven. I hate keeping lightning bloom if you don't already have overgrowth in hand. It's matchup dependent whether I would keep it with overgrowth without actually having a payoff for it as well. So in this matchup, I think potentially just being able to spike something huge very, very early, just turn 4 Ysera, like we've seen from Casey in the past, for example, is probably enough to justify holding onto both of them.
Okay, well, I'm interested to see. We didn't get to see what Bozzdton kept, but we'll find out shortly. Very interested to see, though, because it's a tough one. I think that there is so much discussion about just Bloom, not only as a card, but in the mulligan of when, how, why, and where you keep it. I do think it's one of those cards that is very tough to make a judgment on, because I also see players kind of go use Bloom hyper early when I don't think they maybe have to, and then I see the opposite where it's held on for too long. I don't know. Very tricky card to get the best usage out of. It's probably always going to be good, but how to make it the best is the big deal here.
What did I say? Something turn 4 Ysera?
Yeah, I was confused why you just said something turn 4 Ysera as your deep analysis, but I can't argue with the turn 4 Ysera bit, so I'll let you off with just something.
I've been doing this a long time, Raven. At this point, I'm just phoning it in, if I'm honest.
Oh, yeah, Ysera, then someone wins. Yeah, right, next game, let's go.
Yada yada, Ysera, dragons, kill him. Hearthstone.
And Wince from BoarControl, as he is going to face down that hyper early Ysera. But BoarControl has kept up,
yes,
at least. He does have the Guardian Animals or Mount Seller, depending on what he's after. So he does have things to do here.
So here's the question. Does Boar need a setup turn here? I guess even if he doesn't want a Mount Seller, he can just Guardian Animals straight up. I was considering maybe one turn away from Mount Seller, and then you say limited dragons from my opponent next turn, ideally 0 or 1, and then you have the biggest Mount Seller turn you've ever seen. Or alternatively, if you fear dragons too much on the other side of that, you could also just hold back the Mount Seller as a clear turn with the Broom, because obviously you generate a huge amount of power in beasts that you can then rush out and clear some dragons. But Boar is just immediately going in here with the Mount Seller, which is a very Boar play. He's an extremely tempo-based and tempo-focused player. He generally likes to end each turn as ahead on board as he possibly can with his current hand.
Yeah, I think I like the decision overall, because out of the two choices, I guess, I think Guardian Animals feels like the support play. To back this up if the Mount Seller lives. I think that's very powerful. Whereas this just seems it's so wide, it's going to be at least relatively hard to punish, I think, from Bozzdton. So I do like this ordering from BoarControl of the way he's going about this, but there is just a Starfall in Bozzdton's hand as well.
He just played.
It's not going to make much of a difference.
He just played a 1/1 that turn.
That's a whole extra minion song.
It is. I mean, I don't disagree. I just think it's funny. He just played a 1-mana 1/1 that turn.
Look, I think Broom's good enough that it could be played on curve, right? It's not just a 1-mana 1/1. Well, I play Broom. It's a good card, right? What's its win rate?
What's its win rate?
What's its win rate when played? Really high? Okay. Turn 1 Broom. Let's go. I'm working with the stats.
Yeah, Raven giving a quick lesson here in how to misread statistics. Don't be like Raven.
Bozzzton just trying to see if there's any other way he can make maybe even a Gidra work, but it just doesn't really get there, does it? One mana off being fantastic with the Starfall.
Or does stick the Mount Seller here, which is a huge deal for him because now he has the potential for a huge swing. Because not only is he casting the spell here, but it also pulls Twilight Runner a lot of the time, which now draws 2 more cards with the potential of more procs for this Mount Seller. Or is exploding onto this board right now.
Yeah, and actually summoning Saul's favorite beast ever.
I freaking hate
With
this
the
card, dude.
Are you telling me you don't want more Bog Beams in your deck? I like winding up Sol when I have the opportunity. It's relatively rare, but I get that. Do you like the Bog Beam being cast now, or do you think BoarControl does need to go for the card draw? A little bit unfortunate that the Panther was summoned with
Yeah, that's the awkward part, right? Boar wanted to Bog Beam the thing that came out of the teacher's pet for the full clear. Now he doesn't have that opportunity, so he's just going to rip it here anyway. And now this kind of limits his powerful draws here. Innovate is certainly one of them. Second Iron Bark, I believe, was the best pull in that position. But...
And here's the play I was talking about the last turn that Bozzzton could not make. He now has the ability to go for Gidra Starfall.
Yes.
It could actually go... could actually just go Breath first, right? And then coin.
What to do?
I think drawing the card is relatively important here and just taking a view on whether the turn changes.
Right. So
Even though it doesn't look worth it because you don't really ramp into anything, I think the card draw is more than good enough to use the coin.
Yeah, sure. And having tested some Quest Druid with Darek and Gia for the Chonsu lineup in APAC, I was momentarily expecting that to deal 7 damage to one target and 2 to everything else, but it's not that's not how that card works.
I guess Adris just comes out of nowhere and Bozzzton gets 2 cards from that Starfall.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what?
And that's the disaster turn for Boar. He basically pushed all in there, just hoping he could win the game off the back of that one Mount Seller board that couldn't get cleared. You saw his reaction when the Starfall from the Nature Studies came down. He knew he was in trouble at that point, because now his hand is incredibly low on value, and now Bozzzton can just immediately counter-offensive here with the Alexstrasza.
Yeah, BoarControl does have card draw, though, which is super important, because it's the one thing that we can see Bozzzton does not. So although there's Alexstrasza, there's Swipe, Crystal Power to maybe back up the Alexstrasza, there's not really anything else.
I hate
so
Alex so much!
Wait, what? Starfall kills Alexstrasza solved. This is good, right? But at least he did have that Bog Beam in the trade to kill off this Alex. So BoarControl, although did have his big push wiped out, just because he had the Twilight Runner and it was unanswered, and Bozzzton does not have card draw, he is still more than in it, especially with the survival of the fittest pick.
Yeah, but there's been a missing ingredient from this game up until this point, Raven, and you're starting to see them now. These portals have been in the deck for quite some time, and now they are all going to come at once.
Never mind. Bozzzton has card draw. What was I talking about, Sottle? If it's just going to be Guardian Animals into double Twilight Runner off the top, then yeah. Insane. Alexstrasza's just come back with a vengeance.
Hello, it's the Dream Team. We're just reassembling. Okay, fine.
The reunion tour.
Yeah. It's just never as good the second time round, is it?
No, but they do have the Sparkle Boys supporting them. So. Could be good. Could be worth.
I concede.
And that is, wow, just nothing to dig for BoarControl. Bozzzton not only takes the game, but takes the series. And you've got to be happy with that. Bozzzton, one of the players who only played one match last week. Most weeks, all the players play two, but there are a few that only get to play one because of the way the schedule works. And now going 2-0 in his group with that win over BoarControl. BoarControl goes down to 1-2. That is not how you want to start week number 2, is it?
It absolutely isn't, no. Off to a negative start now for Boar, who has the opportunity to just go 2-2. And Division B is, much more dangerous in that regards. Like, if you're a Division A gamer and you go 1-1 every week, which is, what Boar is potentially on track to be doing right now, you're chilling. Like, job done. You did your work in the early rounds. You got yourself into Division A, and then you hung at 50% with the best players in your region, right, who also ended up in Division A with you. And that's going to reward you with a playoff spot almost all of the time. So if you're in Division B, on the other hand, that could still be staring you at relegation potentially, at least in the relegation bracket as you get towards the end of the season. So you do really want to be going positive if you do find yourself in the unfortunate position of being in Division B for this round-robin portion.
Yeah, but like I said, congratulations to Bozzzton. Just going 2-0 means he's feeling a little bit cushy, a little bit confident. Of course, there's still more matches to be played, and that could change very quickly. But for now, he's got to be feeling great with that one. Whereas we are going to move on to our match number 2, which is Warmer versus Sweden.